Welcome new and existing viewers to this update to the Project Speed Uncapped Demon Form series. I have an exciting update. I have finally given in and decided to test out the Tecrod's tech. Now, before I jump into the details and what's changed, I want to give a couple of shout outs. Firstly, to all you existing viewers who have kept asking and persisting that I try this. There's been quite a few of you, so thank you for pushing me. Secondly, to a fellow content creator, Hungry Boots, and his latest video, which further, I guess, pushed me over the line to actually give it a go. I will leave a link to his video. I highly recommend you give him a subscribe and have a watch of some of his videos. Another fellow Demon Form content creator, always pushing the boundaries in his own ways. And finally, to another content creator, Captain Lance, and his series on his Blood Mage, which isn't directly related to us as Infernalists, but the Tecrod's tech really does originate from the Blood Mages, and he provides a lot of information on his builds and as well as a lot of other topics. So I'll leave a link to his channel as well. So just in the background, the setup which I've landed on here is a demonstration running the highest possible craziness map I could find, which was an overrun by Abyssal map, along with a breach was open, I believe, during a big portion of what you just saw during the intro. It got so crazy in terms of the density that the server just couldn't keep up, and you could probably see I was even rubber banding around a little bit. So shows what the build's capable of, just pretty much face tank everything and still retaining our 84% movement speed with no cast penalty at the moment, so it functions phenomenally. So what is Tecrod's? There is a new Abyssal unique jewel. I believe I have it up here. And we specifically are looking for the tribute to Tecrod. Very, very important. And what this does is it converts any keystone passives within its radius to sacrifice of blood. What this does, as you can read, is regenerates life per 8 life spent. And this on the surface doesn't sound a lot, but what this results in, I don't want to dive into it too deeply, but take my word for it and you'll see the results. You just basically stack this regeneration on top of itself so much, as well as buffing it further with certain life regeneration rate nodes and on gear, and it reaches points which are very comparable to the life recoup route. So it functions quite similarly to life recoup, and I'll touch upon that in a second, but I'll just give a very quick demonstration. So we've converted our spell costs to blood magic, which again I'll jump into in more detail soon, but that is the life cost that Jewel was referring to. And once that regen ramps up, you could see at the beginning it was hard to sustain, but it reaches a point now where not even in my demon form with extra cast speed and my companion out, you can see the life regen that results from that Jewel on the left in my character sheet, and it's surpassing 4,000. So needless to say, that is a tremendous amount and comparable to the life recoup. So that allows us to run the Uncapped Demon Form, because that life regen combats the Demon Form stacking degen. And along with another keystone passive, Zealot's Oath, it allows any overflow from that regen to also recharge our energy shield. So it also provides that defensive layer on top of our energy shield as well. So that is the tech in a nutshell. If you want further details, I highly recommend looking through Hungry Boots and Captain Lance's videos. They dive into it a lot more. I just want to give broad strokes. So how does it differ from the life recoup that we've been running to date? The biggest difference, I would say, is, well, let me start in a different way. They function very similar in many respects, in that both involve some sort of life cost. The Sacrosanctum and the life recoup route with Pyropact being done through self-damaging ourselves, and the recoup being the regenerative path. So there's a cost and a reward. Likewise, with the use of Tecrods, there's a cost. Our spells now cost life, but that life then has the reward of giving us regen. So they function very similar in that respect. The biggest difference, I would say, is, which I'll dive deeper in the pros and cons section chapter of the video, but Sacrosanctum provides a doubled up effect where the life recoup regen is applied both to our HP pool as well as our ES separately. So although Zealot's Oath also with Tecrods does give energy shield recharge, it does depend on your regen passing your max point and then overflowing, whereas Sacrosanctum provides two separate regen amounts, and the ES regen is probably slightly better. But again, I'll dive deeper in the pros and cons. Ultimately, they function in a similar way. It's probably the key takeaway. Tecrods being through life cost of spells, life recoup being through the self-damage through Pyropact. Again, to maximize the two in the life recoup route, we stacked as much life recoup as possible and then wanted to hit our Pyropact as quick as possible, so cast as much as possible, heaviest cost of skills as possible to have that stack to the maximum amount. Tecrods has a similar benefit. The faster you cast, the more you're spending your life. The quicker you're spending your life, the more regen you're stacking. Similar. What changes happened from a gear and passive perspective to set this up? So there was quite a significant shift. We're flying all over the passive tree now, so much so that I can't capture it all on one screen. The first and obvious thing is we need to put the Tecrod jewel in somewhere. We no longer care about our mana, so we have removed Heroic Tragedy and replaced it with Tecrods in the same spot, because we don't actually want any of the influence on any of the other passives. And this dual socket provides the shortest travel amount to a keystone while only giving a negative effect of kind of changing this small passive here, which typically is crit hit chance. So we place it here to get Sacrifice of Blood from what is normally Chaos Inoculation there. What we did then is removed any life recoup we had. So we had life recoup in a cluster here. We had some travel in a cluster there, as well as some life recoup there. We've also skimmed a little bit of fat from some energy shield nodes we had here. We basically needed to get as many extra nodes as possible. We've retained all our movement speed benefits, because that really is, I will still reiterate, the highlight of this build is the no cast penalty and high movement speed. It really brings the map efficiency to light. But we've gotten a whole bunch of points from removing the life recoup, a little bit of energy shield. I think I skimmed some fat some in other places. And what we've done is, before our halving ended here, we've gone down, well, probably most importantly, we've gone down here to get blood magic, because we need to convert all our spells to using life in order for Tecrods to function. We've also picked up Zealot's Oath for the energy shield defensive layer benefit, or the regen overflowing into our energy shield. Along the way, we've picked up this bonus dual socket for a cheap cost of 2 points. And then you have two options. Well, I've played around and I don't know yet which I feel better about. You can get a cluster of nodes here branching off, getting some life regen rate, as well as Arcane Surge's typical mana regen applying to life regen instead. life regeneration rate, I touched upon it earlier and I'll re-emphasize it now on this point. We're trying to pick up as much life regeneration rate as possible. So as we previously tried to pick up life recoup, now we're trying to pick up life regeneration rate. Luckily, the Hail Heart anointment that we had previously still applies. The little node here, which before we had life recoup, well, funnily enough, on the other side, the two small nodes have life regeneration rate, so we've just swapped those two around. And one popular option for Tecrods is to pick up this set of nodes, which leads to changing Arcane Surge to provide life regeneration rate, as well as these nodes here, which provide us a chance to gain Arcane Surge when we're doing a crit hit. Blood Mages benefit a lot from this with their very high base crit hit, but so do we, since we're running cold spells. And even if you weren't running cold spells, with the amount of cast speed that we have, you'd still probably find a pretty consistent proc rate for your Arcane Surge, and then increasing the effect of Arcane Surge, so in effect increasing the life regeneration rate. Alternatively, what I have gravitated more towards is this set of nodes down here, which gives us more spell damage as well as increased life cost of spells, which the higher life cost, the more regen we get, the more benefit we also get from a new support gem, which I'll get to later, and a big fat amount of life regeneration rate on this node as well. The reason I tend to gravitate towards this rather than Arcane Surge is amazing when you do get it up. It also provides cast speed, and since we're buffing, if you go down the route of using it, you're buffing the effect, you can get upwards of close to 30% cast speed as well. The thing I found a little bit clunky, I like to be as practical in my build setups as possible, and although we are flying through maps, there are periods, and especially before boss encounters sometimes, where Arcane Surge only lasts for 4 seconds, and if you spend a little bit of time looting, or there just happens to be a period between packs, you lose that life regeneration rate, and once you start pushing 100 plus stacks of Demon Form, you can lose your Demon Form and have to reset it, which isn't the end of the world, because honestly the build functions completely even without Demon Form. It just is so effective, but I don't know, I found it a little bit clunky. But then again, we do have a movement speed set up. We are flying through maps. I may lean back towards getting these, but I'm dwelling too much on this point. One last thing we also did is we removed our controlled metamorphosis from here. We no longer need the energy shield recovery rate, although I suspect it probably works in unison with Zealot's Oath, but it's not really worth the dual slot. So we picked up an extra 2 points, which we used to have into this as well. We could potentially keep it in there, but I find more value. I really needed resistances from corrupted jewels, so removed that. So in a nutshell, and to summarize, we've retained our movement speed focus on the right-hand side. We've removed our life recoup, converted it to life regeneration rate, and gone down and gotten Blood Magic and Zealot's Oath down the left-hand side. And that's really it in a nutshell, and obviously putting in Tecrods. In terms of gear, not using Sacrosanctum anymore. That's the life recoup approach. Tecrods has no gear required mandatory pieces per se, so that frees up our chest slot. And I went all in and went, well, if I don't need the chest slot, and that chest slot frees up resistances, so I've used the new chest piece as pretty much a stat stick for getting as much resistances as possible, and bonus as high energy shield as possible. And it's freed up the belt slot as a result, and I went, bugger it, I've always wanted to play around with Headhunter. I'd been saving a whole bunch of currency for a unique charm, the Rite of Passage, but I went, bugger it, went all in and got a Headhunter, and by God, love it, love it. But that is one of the downsides of, I guess, this setup is it is expensive. So it's probably another step beyond Life Recoup. I'd probably still recommend Life Recoup as the first stepping stone, but the Tecrod's duel itself, I think, is 9 to 10 div. And the setup really shines in that freeing up the belt slot, and Headhunter is, I think, in the vicinity of about 70 divs. So we're talking really top end here. But technically, you don't need Headhunter. I don't want to remove it at the moment just to prove a point, because I've fine-tuned my stats, and the lack of strength and dex will bugger a few things up. But this is completely free slot. You could balance your resistances better between the other pieces. I've replaced the helmet with a corrupted enchant with more life regeneration rate, and also gotten more resistances, because previously we were running a recoup roll on our helm as well as belt, but we no longer need that on the helmet. So more resistances, and the enchant is super helpful. And that is pretty much it in terms of gear. You could still run this flask, because Life Recoup still actually technically helps, because we are using a lot of life now, so getting hit and having Life Recoup a bit more does help out. A few blood mages, I believe, still run this flask as well, but I find it a little bit more useful to get a high increased amount recovered life fast. Chance to gain a charge and kill an enemy when we're mapping helps. And that is just an extra, especially when you're starting out. As I said, there's a bit of ramp up. So to reduce the amount of ramp up at the start of a map, I'll just spam my flask a couple of times and just dive right into it. Help up that initial region. And I've also updated my amulet simply because we don't need the recoup roll on it anymore, and gotten a bit of a fatter defensive setup. But again, still want the cast speed, still want the plus the levels, rarity, very nice, but everything else beyond that is just energy shield, energy shield, energy shield, basically. And that does lead to the pros and cons of this setup. So I'll start with the cons. I won't demonstrate it because it takes about a minute and a half to get to the top levels, but I have noticed we hit roughly half the Demon Form stack. So but prior with the Life Recoup route, it was quite easy to get up to about 250 at a top end stacks. With the Tecrod's approach, I find it's about half of that, about 125, 150 I can get to with assistance of the Life Flask. The reasons for that is, whereas Recoup has as I mentioned earlier, a completely separate regeneration of health for our Demon Form, and then energy shield for our defensive layer. Now that we're using life cost for and had infinite mana, the Recoup, because of Pyro Pact. In this setup, we are using life for our spell casting. And what that means is our regeneration is shared between the cost of those spells as well as the degeneration from the Demon Form stacks. And as a result, it leads to about half the amount of max stacks that you can get, at least in the way that I am running things. There is Flask tech that you can run. I believe Hungry Boots runs a Gnawing Sash or whatever it's called, which allows your Life Flask to overflow. I believe that it works somehow like that, which allows you to use your Life Flask to get to slightly higher stacks. I'm not a big fan of Flask tech. I'm a lazy gamer. I like to hold down my buttons, zoom through maps, collect loot, rinse and repeat. Less buttons I need to press, the better. And as I mentioned, love Headhunter, so much fun, so great for mapping that, yeah, I hit about half the stacks, but typically it makes no difference because I can run around in human form and clear a map, really. It only really applies to bosses. On the point of bosses, I will very quickly show Xesht first to prove that the build setup can do it. Also to show how I had just finished running through the lead up. You can see I'm sitting at about 120 odd stacks almost. And I don't loot quick enough and I underestimate how much time I got left, and you can see here the regen is just struggling to keep up, even with me spamming the flask, and I bail out at about 130 stacks, and have to sit there for a minute and a half to ramp up again. But finally I enter the boss arena at about 100 stacks. And since we're at slightly less stacks, the boss does take a little bit slower to kill than the life recoup setup, which can enter the arena, like I said, at close to 200 stacks. But still, really makes no difference. It's still very effective. But it does highlight, like I said, we're on the cons, and that is one of them. Secondly, and I've already touched upon this, the cost. Tecrod's 10 div plus or minus 1, at least at the current rates. If you want to really go to the max setup and also get Headhunter, that's a big expenditure. You're looking at about 65 to 75 div, depending on whether you want it corrupted with a decent enchant. As always, as I mentioned with the belts, the old belts as well, be careful if you do go down to Headhunter. It's a big investment. Make sure it has at least 2 charm slots. We get +1 from the campaign. We want all 3 charm slots. The charms do provide a big defensive layer to any build. Get the charm slots, +2. Don't make that mistake. Last disadvantage compared to Life Recoup. As I said, Life Recoup with Sacrosanctum has the regen or the recovery from life and ES separate. It has a lot more ES recovery. The ES recovery in the Tecrods relies on Zealot's Oath, so our life overflowing into our energy shield, and it tends to be much slower. But if you're really at this top end of a setup and you're killing things almost instantly, then furthermore, if you're running Tecrods with a, we've got a chest piece now that we can use. We've got big energy shield. It's a minor downside having less ES recovery, but it is a downside, slightly. So now into the fun part, the pros. And I'm just listing these objectively. I'll touch upon which setup I will tend to gravitate towards myself next. But one of the pros, and I believe Hungry Boots called this out as well, and I've touched upon it in my previous videos and in comments helping a few people out. There is a Abyssal rare modifier on rare mobs which can spawn. They spawn rarely, but they do, which reduces your life and energy shield recovery by I think 50%, but that is enough to completely render the life recoup setup dead. You almost just die instantly because you're just doing so much self-damage that if you lose half of the recovery rate, you damage yourself so much that you just die instantly. So if for the people that have been getting caught out going, oh, I'm mapping, I'm absolutely crushing everything, and then I just pop, that tends to be what happens. The one big pro of the Tecrods is the life cost of spells. If you see here, I'm just holding down my buttons. You're not technically doing self-damage to yourself to the point where it allows you to kill yourself. You just stop casting. So even if you do run into that rare mob, it will reduce and make your life recovery sustain very difficult. You'll probably fall out of demon form very quickly because you won't be able to sustain the degen, or you'll just stop casting, or potentially both, but you won't kill yourself. So that's one big pro. There's less to worry about in maps. Secondly, and the third time I'll reiterate it, it frees up your belt slot, and Headhunter is a lot of fun and awesome and fantastic if you can afford it. Thirdly, another pro is Life Recoup requires, similar to this setup, a little bit of ramp up at the start, about 6 or 7 seconds in a map, or if you return from dumping your loot in your hideout and you return back to the map, it requires a bit of a ramp up to your regen before you can get started. As much as Tecrod's ramp up is equally slow, you can use a life flask to to speed it up so you can start your map a lot quicker. We're talking about a couple of seconds here, so not a massive pro, but it is one. But also, similarly, if you stop during a map to loot or something like that and your recovery drops off, again, you can't kill yourself using life costs spent, so it is a little bit safer as well in the ramp ups. You could technically start with just a few interruptions to your casting, but you're not self-damning yourself to ramp that up, so it is a little bit safer from that point of view. Lastly, a pro is because we're not using Sacrosanctum and can use a normal energy shield body armor, it does provide us with a fatter, bigger layer of energy shield with the life recoup. I had pretty good gear and was pushing, I think, close to 5,000. Now I'm at 7.5, so about 50% more energy shield. And what that provides, again, is a bit of an extra safety layer in that one of the only things that would be able to kill you is a one shot, and now you've got a bigger layer of defense to negate the possibility of that one shot happening. So a little bit safer again. So that's the pros and cons. What will I be personally using going forward? Tecrods. And it's not because it's better or worse. I actually won't dwell on the subjectiveness of that. I'll leave it up to personal preferences to people. Some people love seeing high demon form stacks. They'll love the life recoup approach, the higher, crazier amounts of recovery that you get from it as well, and the energy shield bouncing around and being a lot quicker to recover. But the biggest deciding factor for me was, as I said, those abyssal rare mobs, which are an absolute pain in the ass when you start to reach level 95 and higher, and your XP loss costs become more significant. So typically running into that mob once in 10, 15 maps, you go, oh well, you shrug it off, you just keep blasting. Some people don't worry about XP gain, they just reach a certain point, it's like good enough, I'll just start blasting maps and farming for currency. But I'm trying to push some levels. The passive tree setup in this build is really starved of points, and free points for me mean more movement speed that I can pick up in a few places. So it's something that I'm interested in pursuing. And even running into one of those abyssal rare mobs once in every 10 maps, the XP gain is so slow once you hit level 95 that the extra safety blanket of not having to worry about those mobs and dying to them is what leans me more towards the Tecrod setup. And secondly, and probably the fifth time I'm going to reiterate it, Headhunter is super fun. Where flying, it steals the modifiers from rare mobs that you kill for 60 seconds, and we typically with this movement speed setup finish a map in about, on average, I'd say 2 minutes. So almost every single rare mob you're killing, and if you're juicing your maps properly, you're encountering 10, 12, 15 rare mobs per map. You're just absolutely stacked with buffs, and more often than not, you also get the hasted buff, which just it's crazy with our movement speed setup. It's absolutely nuts, and it's a lot of fun. So it's going to be Tecrods for me going forward, just for that, predominantly for that safety blanket, safety net of not dying to those abyssal mods, so I can level up a bit more efficiently. And in terms of the only things that I've got left in terms of optimizing this build, I've currently got a whole bunch of jewels slapped in, mostly for the corrupted resistances. Because I'm going Headhunter and again sacrificing a gear slot and not be able to get resistances on it, I need to get my resistances elsewhere. So I've been using jewels, and the movement speed jewels with corruptions are ridiculously expensive, and I just have spent 70 div on a Headhunter. So the next amount of currency I'm going to be slowly getting, hopefully 2% movement speed jewels with corruptions, and I will be aiming for a rite of passage charm with the Possessed by Stag, I believe it is, but that costs vicinity of 130-40 divs, so it's a real aspirational goal to farm up towards that. But That charm, what it does is when you kill a rare, you get possessed by a spirit of an animal, and it just provides I think like 15% movement speed, a whole bunch of attack speed, extra damage. It's just a real chase unique, and it just massive buffs, and it will push us along with the corrupted movement speed jewels and over 1 or 2 points from leveling up to probably in the vicinity of about 110 movement speed, I'm guessing. Then plus if a headhunter gets a rare mob, a hasted rare steel, we're probably going to be able to push upwards of 130, 40 and compete effectively basically with what Deadeyes can achieve. So I look forward to hopefully hitting that point. Anyway, I've rambled on a little bit. I apologize. I was meant to keep this a short and sweet video, but I do like to go into a little bit of details as to what I do and why I do it. So I hope you appreciate that. If you do, leave a like and subscribe. It helps out. We're getting close to 1,000 subs. If you don't, well, I understand. Anyway, I'll leave you with a raw map demo of just playing out a full map in a realistic scenario. It's not the best layout. It's just a rather clunky big map where I do backtrack a few times. It's not the most efficient run, but I think it's the most realistic demonstration of the speed of the build and how it functions, and it will just give you a good idea of a realistic idea rather than like the first demo with a absolutely stacked, overrun by abyssal breach, absolutely nuts. No, not every map is like that, far from it. This gives you a more realistic demonstration, I think. So I'll let this play out. It's only 3-4 minutes long. And again, all the best, good luck. I know there's a lot of people responding in the comments. A few people actually have already started taking up the movement speed setups and having a lot of fun and success with them. I'm absolutely ecstatic to hear that, because when I first started this series, I thought it would be beyond the reach of many people, and not many people would, if any, would really take it up, but a lot of people are. So I'm really, really happy to hear that. On that note, I know there's a lot of people actually still struggling to set up even the core life recoup. I've been trying to answer comments as much as possible and help people out, but what I think I may do in a couple of days, I may enjoy this setup for a day or two, but I may put together a video which is more of a progressional video which will outline what the core setup is and how to set something up within maybe a 5 to 10 div budget to help out the people that are just starting off. But anyway, I'll stop rambling on and let this play out. Again, all the best and thank you, and enjoy.